In this video, we'll look at previous empires that ruled the world and their economic power. We'll also talk about new empires and why China might be the dominant country in the near future. Hello friends, and welcome to The Successful Investor, the place where we learn and invest. If you appreciate what we do, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Now let's get into it. The first economic dominance was in the hands of Portugal. Due to its early marine research activities, Portugal was the country that ushered in the so-called Age of Discovery. The first great and successful voyage was to Bartolomé Dias in 1488, which managed to reach one of the southernmost points of Africa, today's Cape Town, South Africa. 10 years later, one of the most important things in human history happened. The Portuguese explorer and navigator Vasco da Gama managed to reach India by water, traveling all over Africa and finding the shortest route from the Atlantic to the Indian Ocean. This marked the beginning of the Portuguese Empire and its conquests. Because of the many crops, spices, and seeds imported from India, Portugal became the richest and most economically developed country in the world. 2 years later, Pedro Álvares Cabral, another Portuguese, reached the coast of Brazil and colonized the country. That's why Portuguese is still spoken in Brazil more than 500 years later. What made Portugal the world's first empire was their confiscated or stolen foreign wealth and their research activities. Decades after these discoveries in the 16th century, the discoveries made by Spain began. These discoveries of new lands brought unprecedented wealth into the hands of Spain. Throughout the 16th century, Spain had the strongest economy, the strongest army, and the most conquered foreign lands. The interesting thing is that what broke the Spanish Empire was inflation. This was known as the Spanish Price Revolution, the period between the mid-16th century and the early 17th century, in which inflation across Europe started to rise. Inflation started to rise because the Spaniards brought in too much gold and silver from the New World. This was from places like Peru, Colombia, Ecuador, Bolivia, Mexico, and other parts of the then Spanish Empire. This caused the value of gold and silver to begin to decline. That is, prices began to rise. This fact, and the several wars that Spain suffered from the Netherlands, dethroned it from being the world's largest economic power. The war with the Netherlands lasted 80 years. That's why the war is called the 80-Year War. The end of the war in the middle of the 17th century describes the germ of the next world empire, the Dutch Empire. This is where Ray Dalio's main study starts. Excluding the Dutch-Spanish 80-Year War in the last 500 years, there have been 16 major conflicts, and according to the Dalio study, 12 of these 16 the result was war. Most often, when we have declining economic power, it is forced to fight against the rising economic power, and the winner of those wars decides what the rules will be for the next few decades or centuries. At the moment, for example, the current economic empire is America, and the rising economic empire is China. According to Dalio, there will be no traditional war, but China will certainly surpass America as an economic power. Later, we'll support these statements with facts, data, and statistics. The good thing is that the trend for at least the last few decades has been to avoid major wars. After the wars between Spain and the Netherlands comes the so-called Dutch Golden Age. After the Dutch World Empire, the time of Great Britain comes. Then comes the American Empire, and then the upcoming period of the Chinese Empire. The following graphs that we will see will consist of 6 main components: technology, education and competitiveness, trade, military power, finance, and reserve status. This refers to the strength of the currency and its status as a global reserve currency. Based on these 6 metrics, Dalio and the hedge fund determine the strength of the current or past economic empires. First, it all starts with improving technology, education, and the competitive ability of the population. As we can see from these 4 countries, the high level is first reached by the Dutch, then British, then America. And now we can see how the technological innovation and education is rising sharply in China. This is always followed by greater economic power, and might in the case of the second line, output, meaning economic power, which invites everyone to trade with the respective economic power. This is the third line. This is the third line. In this case, we see the trade line in China exploding. This economic power and the new trade makes the country richer. A country that is rich must have a large and powerful army to be able to defend its lands and wealth. As we've already collected more lines, we can easily see how empires change over the years. Obviously, we can see the initial dominance of the Netherlands, then you can see how Britain stands alone at the top, and then America. The fact is that China is rapidly catching up with America in all respects, and at some point, its metrics will surpass those of America. The fifth factor is the financial sector. The most technologically advanced country, which has the biggest economic power, the biggest trade, and the biggest army. One of the reasons Dalio doesn't pay much attention to the Portuguese and Spanish empires is because they didn't have financial centers. The world's first financial center was in Amsterdam in the Dutch Golden Age. The first stock exchange was created there, i.e., the concept of being able to invest in publicly traded companies. The next world centers were in London and New York. The future financial sector will most likely either be in Hong Kong or Beijing, and once a state has power over these things, it can impose its currency as the world's reserve currency, which is one of the factors that determines whether a country has reached the levels of economic imperialism. The following graph shows the overall performance of these 6 factors for the UK, Netherlands, India, Spain, France, Germany, and Japan. On the graph, we can see how prosperity was long observed in India before Britain's conquests. France was in the 18th century, Germany in the early 20th century, and Japan in the 80s and 90s of the 20th century. In this next chart, we can see the development over the centuries of America and China, and how we are extremely close to crossing the line and China overtaking America. An interesting and important thing to mention is that the Chinese state has been in decline for the last 100 years alone. In all other centuries, China has been among the most dominant countries in terms of technological development, economy, army, etc. The reason they fell behind in the early 1800s was that China missed the Industrial Revolution beginning at that time. From missing this boom in innovation and new technology, China began to decline for nearly 200 years. But that has since changed dramatically, and China returned to where it once came from. To put China's development in context, let's look at the merging statistics. Keep in mind that these statistics were presented by Bridgewater in 2019, but the information was extracted from McKinsey and is from 2017, so it's very possible and likely that China will be the leader in one of these categories. Regarding global investment, China is the first in the fintech sector. In 2017, China was third in AI and machine learning. Baidu, Tencent, Alibaba, and Xiaomi are huge. China is third in the wearable sector. This is related to wireless devices such as headphones. China is second when it comes to virtual reality. Their difference from America in 2017 was extremely small. China is second when it comes to educational technology and autonomous driving, one of the most important technologies in the near future. Again, thanks to the world-famous McKinsey Research Institute, we can see that the share of unicorns worldwide is the following. 34% of unicorns are in China, 47% in America, and 19% in the rest of the world. Unicorn, in English, is a term that describes a private startup valued at more than $1 billion. However, this statistic is only responsible for the number of unicorns. If we take the value as a sum, we can see that 43% of the global value of unicorns is in China, 45% in America, and 12% in the rest of the world. Many people think that China is a communist country, but China is far from the ideologies of Karl Marx or Lenin. This can be seen very easily and clearly in the following graphs. The market capitalization of Chinese markets has exploded in the last 20 decades. This is the personification of capitalism. However, China is not a pure capitalist state, but capitalism works well in China. If it didn't exist, we would not see such graphs. This second chart shows the influx of foreign investors in China. This shows that capital is flowing from Western countries to China faster and faster. Let's now see the expected changes in the next 10 to 15 years. As Ray Dalio says, these figures cannot be completely accurate, but they'll be accurate enough to show where the world is going. In the next coming years, China will overtake America in terms of gross domestic product, or GDP. The lower left chart shows the current state of the market share for exports. China has a larger share than America, and these are statistics from 2019. Currently, the difference is bigger. The following graph shows the current and expected share when it comes to global economy. China is expected to have 35% of the global economic power in 10 to 15 years, while America is expected to only have 10%. The expected shares of publicly traded shares should be over 30% for China and between 15 and 20% for America. This means that in the next 5 to 10 years, China's capital markets will become many times larger than those in America. This is a huge opportunity for early investors. The last chart focuses mainly on the debt market and shows how the mass of foreign debt will be allocated equally in America and China. This means that China's debt will become more and more appetizing, while debt investing in the US market will slowly but surely decline. Debt investments are mainly targeted at the bond market. Thanks for watching until the end. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you next time.